Fantastic. So we would have completed startup costs, looking at the costs associated with starting up a business, obviously. Operating costs, so the costs that would be incurred after the business in operation. So you said that these would be the things that would contribute to the day-to-day operation of the business. We looked at revenue projections, so being able to look into the future and forecast how much money would be made and how it would be made. And now we are looking at sources of financing. So we are going straight to the last thing we would have written. We would have looked at the difference between debt and equity financing. And we were kind of discussing very briefly which would be the better of the two. Has anybody been, in tune with the news or anything? Has anybody heard about, what happened with Errol Fabian over the week? Was it over the weekend? Last week, end of last week, over the weekend?
Yes, Mas.
We should tell us about it. And whatever you know about it.
I heard that he was, owing the company. He was owing the bank over, I think, $350,000, and he couldn't pay it off. So I guess he had to evacuate.
He was evicted.
Yeah. Evicted, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened was somebody did a GoFundMe app, GoFundMe, and he got over I think it was $60 to pay back the bank.
Right. How much US dollars?
I think it was 60.
60 or 6? I don't know how much it was in US, but as the question very rightly said, thank you. So Errol Fabian, if you all don't know who Errol Fabian is, then I am gravely concerned. But I'm assuming that we all know what Gael, the channel, is. Gael operates from out of his home. So Gael is a local channel that's been in operation for a while. I think at a point in time, it had either been revamped or it was not operating. Something had happened to Gael at some point, and then they came back and it was, all whatever. So he had taken a loan or a mortgage, I believe. A mortgage and a loan are more or less the same thing for different purposes. And he had not repaid the full amount. So remember, we were talking about how debt financing incurs interest over time. And you all would have learned this in primary school, I think. But basically, why he would have ended up in that situation where they needed to repossess his home, where they needed to get him out of the house and take the belongings, is that the bank was then claiming that house as theirs because he was in so much debt and he had not repaid by whatever the stipulated time was. And we could talk about, and it is because his main job is as the operator of Gael, the channel. And we could talk about why. We could talk about two things in general. We could talk about what sort of circumstances would lead to Gael more or less failing to support itself as an enterprise, as a cultural enterprise. And we could also talk about debt and equity financing in this situation, because the reason why his home and his all of the archives and things had to be evicted was that he was owing debt financing to the bank. But then he was able to, just give me 1 second. But then he was able to raise over 350,000 TT dollars in less than 12 hours. And very rightfully so, people were saying, oh, dang, I don't understand how they pay an Errol mortgage and it have so much poor people and it have so much single mothers, why they do blah, 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 blah. But the point of the matter is that this is somebody who has contributed tremendously to the cultural industries in Trinidad and Tobago over the years. So it shouldn't be out of the question as to why people should rally in to raise funds to save something like Gael, but that's a different story. But so now we're looking at when he raised that money that people would have donated out of the goodness of their heart, and for people to donate more than 350,000 TT dollars in less than 12 hours. That's not even a full day. That's not even 6 o'clock this morning to 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Less than 12 hours. That means that people, value what they contributing towards. But that funding, that donation would have been not equity funding because there's not a percentage of ownership being given up, but it didn't have to be repaid and it didn't have to carry interest. So now we could think about whether it is that Uncle Errol should have gone to the bank in the first place to get this funding, to get the channel running and to get the home running, or whether he should have gone that route initially, whether the first point of contact should have been getting donations. So that way he would not have been in a situation where he had to repay or be evicted or have to raise funds eventually anyway. So we're just looking at kind of, the pros and cons of debt and equity financing. And then later on when we go on into the looking at kind of marketing, the marketing side of things, we could look at existing things like Gael and why they fail to make enough money to sustain themselves, because that's such a big issue that's going to need a lot more to deal with it. It's not just that Uncle Errol wasn't making money. It's not just that he took a big loan from the bank and couldn't repay it. It is a whole, and that's what we're finding out from the people we're interviewing as well. It's a whole socio-economic, phenomenon as to why a lot of our existing cultural enterprises are in debt, or why a lot of them are, hanging on by a thread. What is missing in terms of the business mindset behind running these different ventures, I suppose we could say. So that is, an interesting thing to think. And these are examples that you have to be aware of, especially in Form 6. Form 6 is like the most important time in your entire life to read the newspapers. Because when them exam papers reach, when you start to do past papers, what gets you your marks, and trust and believe, I could tell you about getting marks. What gets you your marks is using real life examples, practical examples of things, right? So that's a great example to look at many different things, to look at the different types of financing and how they operate and, the pros and cons of them, and also to look at our creative industries and the ways that they are failing and thriving, and what is missing, because that's your task. You all are the upcoming generation. You all are the people who have to come up and, change that. And when we are, brainstorming, it's not always to come up with a new fun, innovative, never before seen on TV idea. Sometimes it's to look at existing things and see how we can use our expertise to improve them, right? If anybody has anything they want to contribute on that, or we could go straight into sources of financing. But remember this example, because I'm going to talk about it at some point in time again as well, because I think it's very important for us to talk about it in this subject.
So with the point you made, when it is asked whether he should have gone to the bank to get the loan in the first place, or basically go the route of doing a GoFundMe, I would say that probably the GoFundMe at the point in time would have never made the amount of money that it made, because if it is that he wanted, well, when it is he wanted to grow the venture, people would have never seen the importance of it at the point in time because they didn't have it for so long. But now that we do have it and we do recognize, okay, this is the importance of it and this is why we need to actually keep this going. I think that is why it was able to make so much in the GoFundMe. So I think in the initial part for him to finance it, it would have been the better road to go through the bank at the point in time.
That makes sense. You have a very good point there. That people kind of don't see the value of things until you don't miss the water until the well run dry or until the well is about to run dry. But then the funding could have not necessarily have been a GoFundMe where it's just that, you give me money and I go about my business. But remember, we were talking about there are things that you can do to raise funds where the person who's giving you the funds gets something out of it. So Uncle Errol could have maybe, and I hope you all understand, this is not a personal attack or anything, to say he should do this better or whatever, but it's just us brainstorming as a class because that's what this subject entails. But he could have done equity financing, for instance. So he could have gotten somebody, the big names or the people with big money, uptown people in the arts, and said, okay, if you give me this much money to buy cameras or whatever, or to go towards my mortgage, then you'll get 5% ownership of Gael. And then they would have, a little, and even if maybe it's his brainchild, so I'm not sure if he started Gael, but I actually didn't even know that he was operating it until, this entire thing happened this weekend, exactly as Joshona said. But it could have been that he raised funds in such a way that, you have investors. And that's what we're going to talk about now, actually. That, the different sources of financing that he could have used aside from, going the traditional route through the bank. So let's get right into it. But that was a very good point, actually. And Trinidadians, Lord, we do like to and actually it's not a Trinidadian thing, it's a human thing. We don't pay attention to people unless they're dead or dying. And we don't pay attention to things unless they're also dead or dying. And everybody wants to look back with nostalgia and say, yeah, boy, oh gosh, it's a shame we don't have Gael, or you remember Gael? But nobody is watching Gael, or nobody is contributing. Anyway, right. We all know the drill. 10 minutes, class gonna end, you'll come right back, okay? So, our first source of financing, we're looking at private. Write that down, of course. So private it encompasses different types of financing as well, different sources in a way. So private would be the general category, and then you have different sources falling under private. So when we say private, you really mean things that, because you all know when we differentiate between the public sector and the private sector, private really means private sector, as in not the bank, not the government. So it doesn't necessarily mean private as in, secretive or anything like that. Private just means non-financial institutions then. Anything that is not an official financial institution, that is what you'd consider, private funding. So, as I said, something that's not linked to the government or the state. So private sector as opposed to public sector. And this could be anything or anybody that offers funding who is not part of a state, when I say state, I mean government financial institution. That's what we're talking about when we talk about private. And this would be any form of venture capital, angel capital, or grants and loans, which we're going to talk about in a little while. Again, I was going to say something. Right. So this would mostly be when we're looking at the startup capital, building capital, all of this. So we spoke previously about capital building. And we did mention, briefly the different places that you would get money from. But this is just expounding on it a little more, looking at the different options that are available to you where funding is concerned. So I hope you all, have that down so that I can go forward. If not, just shout and let me know that you're still writing or whatever the case is. Again, don't just copy from the PowerPoint. Write things in your own words and write examples, your own examples for everything, and write it over and over and over so you really understand it. Even me, a lot of these concepts, sometimes I find that I find it hard to use the terms because I haven't committed to fully understanding businessness. Right, so when we talk about some of the institutions that might be private and give funding, we talk about, and this is a term that I assume you all would learn in Caribbean studies, in SOS, in econ, and them kind of humanities subjects. NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Some of them offer grants and funds for startups in whatever their industry is. So for instance, I don't know if they actually do this, but Filmco, it is the Filmmakers Collaborative at Trinidad and Tobago. They may or may not, I just use them as an example, offer a grant or a scholarship for people who want to fund a film locally. And then, so it would be that whatever industry they're in, so for instance, you might have in the oil and gas industry, so BP might give a scholarship or a fund for somebody to study petroleum engineering, or the Art Society of Trinidad and Tobago might have a fund for artists to put on an exhibition. So it would be in whatever the industry is. But this is a real life example. Kariri, I don't know what it stands for, I can't remember what it stands for. But Kariri, they deal with like Food and Drug Administration locally. Let me look up what Kariri stands for. And they have a program called IAS, which I think is Idea Assistance Service, maybe. Kariri stands for Caribbean, of course. Hold on, I don't know.
This is Caribbean Industrial Research Institute, Commercial and Industrial.
Good grief.
Yeah, that was
Caribbean Industrial, but where did A come out from?
Caribbean.
Oh, right. Caribbean Industrial Research and something.
Institution or institute?
Institute.
Shoshana, is it?
Institute.
Right. So Kariri deals a lot with, thank you very much, with food things. So Kariri has also, but it's just generally research in businesses. So they have this program called IAS, where essentially if you have an idea that is unique, you can submit your idea to Kariri and they will more or less put you on a program to help you develop that idea into a business. So they had, for example, there's a lady who was a seamstress, and as a seamstress or a tailor, you have different measurements to take. So you have, all the measurements for everything. So her idea was to put all of the measures in one kind of ruler or one tape line or something, which is something that I suppose hasn't been done before or hasn't been done in that way. So she would have taken her idea to Kariri, to the IAS program, and they would have said, okay, that seems unique. So they put on a program where she learns about developing the business, and she would talk to people in the industry and find out about, you know, the legal costs. And then they would also get funding for her to create the products or source people to make it, market it, all the things like that. So this is when we're talking about, actually, I think Kariri might be a government institution, but this is just an example of, you know, source of private funding. So rather than going to the bank and asking for money, there might be something specifically for what you are doing. And this is very common in England. They will have a grant for Black female filmmakers, or they might have a grant for a dance company producing South Asian dance choreography. So things like that when we're talking about private.
Miss, does it matter about the amount of grant they offer, whether if it's a small portion or large?
Well, no, that's the thing. A lot of times these things are quite small grants, but some money better than no money. So, and that is the thing. If you are getting a small grant from one place, then you could supplement that money that you need, that startup cost that you need, by using the other sources of financing. So more than likely, and that's I'm very glad Lucretia brought that up. The call is going to end in a minute. You'll know what to do. More than likely, anything you have to fund, you're going to have to use a combination of different sources of funding. It's very unlikely and not really recommended that you put all your eggs in one basket and get all your funding from the same place. The best way to go is to use a combination, even if it's a combination of debt and equity. So that way, if your business busts, you know, you're in some debt rather than all debt, you know. So if you have to pay back things, you know, so it's good to have a combination of different sources of financing, so that in the unlikely event that the business busts, not all of the funding you would have received, you would have to pay back. Yes, so my point is to say that, number one, some money is better than no money. So even though a small grant may not cover your costs, and you could think about it as though, if you, like for an example, if you want to go to school abroad or you want to go to school here, because school is expensive either way. And yes, you might get a scholarship that's a partial scholarship, and you can't afford to, you know, pull out of your own pocket. How are you going to raise the rest of funds, right? You have a combination of different sources of financing. And some money is better than no money. Okay. So yes, under private financing, you will have both debt and equity. One of the, I guess, most popular or useful sources of debt financing when we talk in private would be credit unions. You'll get a credit union loan, and credit union loans are typically have lower interest rates than the bank, which is why a lot of people opt to go to credit unions instead of going to the bank, because you're going to have to pay back less money, more or less. I'm not exactly sure why or how that works, but that is a fact of life. Adulting 101, you know, credit union is typically better to get a loan from than the bank. So, in addition, in private funding, you'll also have some institutions that would give literally just a check, as I said already. So they'll say, okay, we're running a competition for a unique idea in environmental preservation. So everybody will submit their ideas, and the best one will get a $10,000 check. Even thinking about National Poetry Slam, I guess that's not, you know, you're not going to go directly to them for funding for something. But if you come first place in National Poetry Slam and you get $50,000, it literally is $50,000. The first prize is 50, the second prize is, I think, 30, and the third prize is 10. $10,000 is a lot of money when you start a business. Look, Elisa is here in the last half an hour class. So yeah, so some institutions will give awards as well. and all talking about capital building. Are we all good with that? We all have that down. Anybody have any thing that they want to clarify or question before we go on to the next source of financing? Are we all good? Am I recording? Yes. So another one, when we're talking about sources of financing, would be angel capital. Anybody want to guess, or anybody knows what angel capital is?
Miss, that would be like a sponsorship.
More or less, yes. Well, kind of. In a way, it is a sponsorship, and later on we'll go to deal with the difference between sponsors and donors. But an angel, I guess, would be more of a donor.
So it's like somebody who associates with your capital, and if you want to start up a business.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
As we go into it, hold on, right? So an angel investor usually is just a person with a whole lot of money who is just nice enough to give you money to help start up your business. And that's why they call them an angel, because they will have, it's low risk in the sense that they're not going to have, very strict repayments, anything, or you might not ever have to repay them. It's really just out of the kindness of their heart. So I suppose you could say, not in a strict sense at all, but I suppose you could say that the people who contributed to Uncle Errol's GoFundMe were angels. But the thing about angel capital is most times it will come from somebody who just, has a lot to give and have a good heart or believes in your idea enough. So write this down. You'll get...
Miss, this will go underneath private?
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. Yeah. This would go under private as well. The next few that we're going to do are private, actually. Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to get angel capital from, definitely, you ain't getting no bank just giving you money just because they feel to give you, because that's how banks make their money, right? By lending money and collecting interest. But angel capital, or kind of any capital in general, but it will either be to start up your business, or it will be if you have an existing business and you want to expand it. So then somebody will say, all right, your business running good. I feel I'll give you 50,000. Just don't take no horrors, don't mention it. Just hold that 50,000 and don't spend it all in one place. That is angel behavior, if you ask me. Right? So now in some cases, it will be equity financing. So sometimes the angel will say, all right, I've given you a whole lot of money, and I want 2% or 5% of the profit sometimes. But generally speaking, angel investors are people who really are not just invested in the economic side of the business, but they really just want to see it be great, basically. And this could be that they give you a one-time investment. So they give you at once, they just say, all right, I give you $50,000, or they give you every now and again a slightly smaller amount. So, if you have an auntie, and this is what we're saying, is it could either be when we're talking about private, it could either be an institution, and not really going to get angel capital from an institution, but it might be an aunt. You might have a rich aunt, she have no children, she have no husband, and she see you're selling soccer bag, and she say, oh gosh, I love that niece of mine, and every now and again, she's just give you $1,000 to support your soccer bag business, or she might just give you $5,000 at the beginning. And angel investors are usually there to carry the company through, because the opening stages of a company are really the most difficult parts of running it. So you could write down examples. It could be family and friends. It could be crowdfunding, as we said with Uncle Errol and with the GoFundMe. Sometimes there are angel groups. I guess this is a thing that rich people do. You know, when you're rich and you have friends who are rich, you just say, you know what, let's all have a big rich group where we do nice things with our money and give back to the young people or something like that. So you might have an angel group that will actively seek out, you know, upcoming like startup businesses. And you in this group then would give them money without asking for anything back. And a lot of times it's a pips thing for them to be able to tell the rich friends, well, you know, I gave so much money to this young guy who was doing this thing. And or when the business get big, you say, oh, well, you know, I was an angel investor in the beginning of that, and I gave them this amount of money. And if it wasn't that, you know, out of the goodness of my heart, then because rich people love to feel, you know, good about themselves. It makes them feel less guilty.
Miss,
yeah.
Like, remember when you said like a group of angel investors, would the show Shark Tank like be a good example?
It could, you know. It could, yeah. Even though, from my understanding of Shark Tank, it's that those investors are, I think that might apply a little bit better to the next concept we went into. And I say that because when we're looking at the difference between venture capital and angel capital, the main differentiating factor is what is in the interest for the investor. The reason I say Shark Tank might not necessarily be angel is because the investors in Shark Tank are very much concerned about the profits that they can make from investing in this. I don't get the sense that they care that much about the person or their idea, but they're really just looking for how much they could get from it. Most times angel investment, or actually in all cases, angel investment is something that you don't need to repay. The only thing is that sometimes if you have equity financing, so I guess in the case of Shark Tank, you know, you might give a however much percentage of the profits or how much percentage ownership, then you're going to repay like that. But when we go on to the next example, you'll tell me whether you think Shark Tank is more angel capital or venture capital. So yeah, so it might be family and friends, your rich auntie who have no children and really likes you. It might be an angel group, or it might be crowdfunding. The whole point of it is that it does not have to be repaid, and it's mostly given from the goodness of people's hearts. So you could write down the pros and cons. The pros would be that, of course, you're not incurring any debt, and you don't have repayments. Another nice thing about this, which would set it apart from state funding, when you go to the bank, they are not just going to give you, unless they're real wicked like Island Finance, it's just fund any and anybody because that's how they make their money. But you need to have collateral. So you need to have something in your possession so that if push comes to shove and if to hit the fan, the bank could hold you to something. So in the case of Uncle Errol, the reason why they would have taken his home and taken where the TV station is because he would have put that forward as collateral. Or if you have land, if you have, I'm not sure if they use vehicles, but whatever your big possessions are, if you have a big gold chain not worth how much ever money, that is going to be your collateral. But in the case of angel capital, because it's not a formal situation like that, you don't need to have collateral. You just need to have a good idea and I guess a good heart and good luck. So if you're a small, you're just 18, 19, 20 and you want to start up a business, you have no kind of collateral because you don't own nothing, you're still in a room in your parents' house, then this would be a good way to get financing because you don't need to prove that you have anything. You don't need to prove that you have collateral. So the pros, as we say, would be that you have no debt incurred because the person just lending you, just giving you, not lending, just giving. So you don't have repayments to make. which means that after you're done, make your profit of 5,000 at the end of the month, you don't have to think about paying back 4,000 to the bank because you got that money as a gift, more or less. Good way to think about it is as a gift. And the nice thing as well, if you have an angel investor who is a philanthropist or a wealthy person, so for instance, if we went to, if you know, you're starting up a music business and you went to Kenny Phillips and Kenny Phillips give you some money, you also have that expertise and he has enough links in the industry to help you in starting up your business as well. So that's another benefit with angels. A lot of the time, they are going to have links. Links is run things in Trinidad and Tobago. If nobody ever tell you that before, I tell you that now. So the angel most times is going to be somebody who's interested in what you're doing. So they're going to help you to grow in that way. They'll introduce you to their partner who does do this, or they might, you know, give you expertise and advice on how to make it. Now, the cons, so we just did the pros. The cons of angel investment is that usually it's going to be for relatively small. So to us, it might sound big, but it's more than likely going to be smaller than what you would get from the bank or what you would get from you know, a formal financial institution. And in the case, as it will be with all types of equity financing, there are strings attached. So if you give up a percentage of shares or a percentage of ownership, there are going to be strings attached where the person, the angel or the angel group is going to have some kind of say in the running of your business. So that can be a con, but again, money is money and some money better than no money. And then eventually you might be able to buy them out. If you make, you know, you get real big, you might be able to buy them out of their, you know, how much ever shares they have. So I know we are low on time, but I just want to go into the next one because I think it's a very important comparison and contrast between angel capital and venture capital. Anything that anybody wants to clarify or add about that? Any good examples that you could think of about angel capital? Are we good to go? All right, I'm moving on. So, oh, there's a link that I have to send you all as well. So venture capital, remember I told earlier I was running out of pictures, so here's Buddha, laughing Buddha. Venture capital is always going to be equity financing. So you're either going to get that from an investment firm or an individual, sounding, you know, similar to angel. But venture capitalists usually give to established businesses that, you know, that promising more or less a good rate of return to the investor. This is why I say I would consider Shark Tank venture capital, because these people expect something significant in return for the funding that they are giving to you. And they will also expect to have shares of the company. So it's not so much, they don't really care about you. They don't really care about your idea particularly. They don't care about to see you be great. They want to know, what can I get out of this? They are thinking, if I invest in this, how is this going to come back to me in a significant way? How am I going to gain from this? They want to make money. And that's why I say, the more I talk about it, I think Shark Tank is definitely venture capital. And why I say this is because in venture capital, they're going to be very calculated. And usually they avoid businesses that are in the early stages because there's a lot of uncertainty, you know, about whether it will make, especially in these COVID times. Ain't nobody already, you know, trying to be given venture capital because businesses busting left, right, and center, right? So a venture capitalist is going to be, I guess, more discerning, a little bit more discerning than an angel capitalist, because this money that they invest is supposed to come back and make money for them. That's the main purpose here. They want to capitalize, right? And typically this is going to be a larger sum of money because of the anticipation that the more they give, the more they're going to get back from it. As opposed to angel capital, they're giving it out of the goodness of their heart. More than likely, they're not getting anything back from it. So they're not going to give you $300,000. But with venture capital, they say, all right, if I invest $300,000, 5 years down the line, that's going to bring me back $500,000. How much $500,000 is? 500. How much $500,000 is, right? I think it's 500,000 or maybe $1 million. So venture capitalists saying, all right, if I invest $300,000 into this business, I'm going to get back $1 million. So they will give you more money because they know that they're getting back more money from it, right? So you could compare it and contrast it to angel capital. More than likely, venture is always going to be equity, of course, because they're expecting something back from it. Angel capital, on the other hand, might just be literally a donation that you don't have to repay. And then venture capital is expected to give high returns to the investor, but angel capital, there's no strong expectations. The most the person might do is purchase shares or stakes in your company. So the benefits of venture capital will be that it will help with quick growth of your business because it would be a large amount of money, more than likely. Of course, that's another proof. It's plenty money, real money, you're gonna get most times because, of course, the person or the venture capital business is expecting high returns. There's a link that I'm going to share in the chat here. In Trinidad, we have a venture capital incentive program. It's called VCIP, Venture Capital Incentive Program. And the point of it, I will send it in the chat. The point of it is that they want to encourage venture capitalists among the haves, the people who have money in Trinidad. So the government has this program where when you'll check the link, you'll double check, but I can't remember exactly what the incentive is, but basically they're telling businesses that if you have money and you provide venture capital to start up businesses, the government going to do something nice for them, something nice, Trinidad, real nice and all that. But yeah, you're going to be able to grow your business quickly. You're going to get plenty money in most cases, and also you're not going to have to make monthly repayments because it's going to be in the form of shares or shares or some percentage stake in the business. So it's not like with a loan, you're going to have to pay back a certain amount per month, but with venture capital, because it's just this huge injection of money and the repayments will only come when you reach a certain amount of profits, you don't have to worry in the same way as you worry with loans about having to pay back every month. Now, the cons, the not so great things about venture capital is that you're probably going to have to give up a considerable amount of stake or ownership in the business because these people expect so much to come back to them. They're not really going to take 1% ownership of their business. They might take 10, might take 5, they might take 50. Which sounds like a little bit, but it is a lot. You know, you could do a lot in a business with 10, 15% ownership. So that's something to consider. You know, high returns would, lead to high expectations, high costs, all of that. And it is kind of tedious to have to, that's another con, it's kind of tedious to have to prove yourself to these venture capitalists because they expect so much. You really have to, You had to prove that you could give them a lot. So it's going to be more difficult to come by than angel capital, especially if, you know, you're nice and people like you, your family known in the community. You'll get angel capital easy. You have a lot of people who are willing to give money. I know people who went to school abroad, whole families went to school abroad just over angel capital, just over you know, donations from people in church. But venture capital now, think about it again. Like if you're going to school, you're going to have to prove to the scholarship institution that you're smart enough to do well with the money that they give you to go to school. But if you have somebody who just, you know, have no children, you don't need to prove to them that you're smart enough. You just need to prove that you're nice and they'll give you money. So I guess you could use that as another example between venture and angel. But of course, all of these things are specific to businesses. I really thought we were going to finish this topic today, but apparently we're not. Right. But I'm going to release you all for today. Does anybody have any questions about that? I'm leaving this up for 2 minutes, so you'll be able to write it down. If there's anything you want me to repeat, try to remember it. But we all good with that? We looked at angel capital, venture capital, which are under, as Joshua very rightly said, these are both private. These aren't public sources of financing. The syllabus has it laid out in a silly way. They have private and then angel and venture, but angel and venture are types of private financing. We all good with that so far? Eventually, when we finish with the topic, I'll like upload all of these slides. Somebody was saying something?
Oh, I was just saying that that's a good.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, me too.
Fantastic.